Welcome to the second lecture of the official Brosatsu clothing masterclass. Last week, we went over the very basics of fabric, and that's pretty much you draw a square of fabric and apply a little bit of force to it, fold a little bit, just kind of get used to the idea of clothing existing in 3D space and very simple pieces of clothing. Today, I want to take those ideas we explored last week and of course develop them into something more useful when you're actually working with big pieces of cloth, whether it's a hoodie or a big blanket, whatever it might be. That's what we're going to get into today. So, with that, let's start here. So, last week we went over, just to reiterate, right? I'll do a little quick one here so we have an idea in case someone did not review their homework or do their homework. Hopefully, you guys all did, right? Piece of cloth, you apply either tension to it, right? Which is where you pick it up here and you lift it, and then gravity does its work. Or there's a compression where we squish it in, usually hanging on something, and it kind of creates this sort of wave, right? And you get like this. That's what was last week, right? We all remember that? Can I see some yeses in the chat? Please. Can I please see some yeses? I need to know. if, if nobody knows, it's like, uh-oh. Uh-oh. All right, good. So, all right. So, um, as we take this and move into more complex forms, there are six I want to go over specifically. I mean, maybe not so much six. I mean, like I don't want to put numbers to it because um you can really fold this stuff in infinite patterns, as I'm sure you can imagine. Like we were talking about like face cloths last week. What happens if I take like a silk bed sheet and I just throw it randomly on a bunch of objects? You can imagine there's a lot of random stuff, right? So I'm going to try and cover the really, oh, pardon. Did Zoom add a separate pay for the chat feature? No, luckily it came with the chat feature. Train of thought was I saying? Right. The more complex shapes that we're going to interact with for this. So, first one I want to go over, as we have this here, is oh, pardon, hit a wrong button again. Jeez. You'd think I like fell down some stairs this morning or something, you know? Bum 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 bum. Hitting all the wrong buttons. I think I need to drink more coffee. I need to drink way more coffee, right? Okay, so the first one is a diaper fold, is what you kind of call it. And this is when you have these two forces combining. And so what happens when this happens is we're going to draw on our forces. Let's say we have two pinch points, right? So these could be like hands, right? Here's some hands. Oh, I can do better than that, right? I'm going to draw a nice, really nice hand. And we'll just copy that over because you can do that in digital, right? You can just grab it, just squish it over, pretend you drew both of them. If someone asks, I drew both these fists, right? That's what you're going to tell everybody, or I'm going to find you. Okay, cool. Yeah, I just need to drink more coffee, period. I know. So if we have like this piece of cloth here and we have these two forces of tension pulling it up, right? Two pull points. What's going to happen is the cloth is going to take, because gravity affects it, this kind of flow, right? And you can see how they kind of widen as it goes down. And so you get like kind of a small one, a big one, a big one, a big one. And that's the kind of physics I want to get your brain around. Because again, I know I said this last week, and I'm going to be a broken record on this topic. Drawing clothing confidently is all about kind of putting like a physics engine in your head so you can imagine how gravity and pulling tension affect this just completely limp piece of fabric? Because that's really what we're talking about, right? Is how the real world reacts to this kind of inanimate, really flexible object. And that's why clothing is just so complicated, is because of this sort of, like I said, physics engine you have to download into your head, right? So with this in mind, I'm going to just give this a little bit of an erase because we're going to just draw over it, right? So what happens here? Right? Boop, boop, make it a little smaller. What's going to happen is you have to put one of these on both sides because this is the tension point on both sides, right? So the next thing that we want is you can just kind of imagine, and this is where I was talking about the lines earlier, if I'm not getting too lost here. You can kind of imagine all of this in rough lines, and then you just connect your lines as you need to for the cloth, right? I'll even do this in a different color so you can really see what I'm talking about here, right? Right? Do you see the radiating lines? Is that all making sense so far? I'm not losing anybody? Okay, I see an okay. Good so far. Okay, excellent. So if I make these light and we actually go in and start to draw some lines, you will start to see how this all works, right? So, right, remember, just follow your lines. And remember from last week how I said you can kind of make these guides, right? You can just sort of put in the bottoms and then connect them, right? See, let's make the background a little lighter, right? Can we still see the background? I hope so, probably. Cool, right? And the tension point, right? Can do this, right? We can just kind of drop it in, drop it in, drop it in. We're just sketching, keeping it loose, right? See that? Just kind of following the general shape. And all of a sudden, we turn this nonsense off. We have a piece of fabric that two hands are picking up. And where's our hands? There's our hands. We want them hands back. Get that. Get it. Get it. Get this out of here. Get this out of here. Get this noise out of here. This is ruining my fabric. See? And there we have, like he's going to fight a bull or something, right? He's holding his fabric. God help him. Right? Okay. That is the basis of this kind of tension. We'll call this like a drape. Let's call it a drape, right? Because this is sort of what happens. I think some people call it like diaper folds, and I think that's weird because why would you want to associate diapers with nice fabric? I don't understand. That feels like kind of a weird play in my book, but I don't know. Okay, so this one's like call it draping because that sits better with me. I like that way better. Right? Let's that we got to be let's say room. Okay, cool. So that's draping. That's when you have this kind of hanging in between. And that, like that, I remember last week, someone asked about bandanas, and this is kind of why I was like stumbling a little bit. It's like, oh, okay, I got to explain the next part of this whole thing, right? Um, but luckily, that's it there. And then later in this lesson, I will get into the shading portion because I remember that was asked too. But first, we're going to just cover these sort of major folding patterns in a more detailed way. And the funny thing is about detail, it's just a bigger piece of cloth, so there's more room and material for the forces to interact with. So there's our draping. Let's move on to the idea. What would you want to call this? Let's call this. Maybe like a 1 point of complex tension, which we kind of covered last week, but let's get into it more. And this, remember when I was talking about like all that bottom stuff? So if I just like draw a real wacky, we use the red here. Let's just draw an absolutely crazy like zigzag, right? Like what is that? That's nuts. Well, if you follow this idea of stacking fabric in space and just these zigzags from a point of tension, you can make really complex folds, right? And you just line them up, right? Line them up, 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 line them up. Like, see, all I'm doing is I'm just taking these points and connecting them to the tension point, right? Same thing here. You're just lining it up. Boom, boom, boom. You see how pretty that is, right? You can put a little fold to it too, because fabric has a little curve to it. That's better. We can do better than that. Let's stack it right in, right? It's gonna stack right in. Boom, boom. See that? Does that make sense? I didn't go too crazy with that one. Everything makes sense. There's actually a really good example of this if you want to do studies. Uh, is togas. You can see these on like marble statues, or I guess they don't really have paintings. They have like I think they're called frescoes. And funny thing, when I was looking for references for this, you type in toga and you actually get the My Hero Academia character more than Roman togas, and I was really confused for a second because of that. Yeah, when I was going through references for the lesson, but like togas are a really good thing to study for this kind of like this sort of cascade of fabric. Because if like we do this same thing, oh, why did the chat close? There's the chat. Boom. Yeah, yeah. Toga took over the friggin' the search, which is just I'm great. Oh, what? Okay, whoops. Pardon me while I hit all the wrong buttons all the time. So you can also do this sort of cascade. Let's call this the cascade. Do we like that? Like calling it cascade? I like calling it the cascades. I'm going to call it that. You can do this in all kinds of ways, right? You can do like these kinds of shapes too, where you know your tension point, right? And then it comes down nice and thin. It just keeps connecting. All you're doing is connecting the line, right? You see how simple this is, but it makes it look like you know what you're doing, right? See that? And you can even, if you want, like if you want to put decorations on your fabric, like say you want a stripe, you just follow this line here, but do it in a way that follows the rules of your form, right? See that? See how I just have a stripe now, right? And here, watch this. Then we can like say you want to make this more complex. Let's hop in with a little bit of shade and put some shade in the back parts, right? Just shady, 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 right? This helps us break up the form, and all of a sudden you got a really nice little napkin there. Look at that, right? And this goes for any, like if you want to put lots of stripes on here, if you want to just load this thing up with stripes, and I actually missed a line here. Don't tell anybody. Bum, bum, bum. This should be there. Right? And you can do like all kinds of stripes. You can just stripey, 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 stripey. And these kinds of things are also helpful if you want to sort of study what the form is doing, right? So this one, let's call this one because as I said, like these names are actually really arbitrary and random, and nobody really has a consistent one. I People call this like an advanced tension. I'm gonna call it the fancy napkin, the really fancy napkin. Okay, maybe that'll help you remember it for the rest of your life. The really fancy napkin. And this is just advanced drapery, right? The process is very simple. It's just, right? Start with your base. That's one. Then two. Actually, hold on. I just realized I have to draw over it. So one is tension point. Two is not start with your base, but draw a base. And three, just connect them in a way that makes sense. Right? Oh, well, actually, we can do a little aside for so the comment to those who watch this later is I feel if it was a fancy, sorry, I feel like if it was that fancy, it would be folded into a shape like restaurants do, which is something we can explore right now because I think that counts as an advanced fold, right? I think we agree with that. So that's actually something we can do right now. And I want to show you real quick, right? You can take bum, 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 right? That's you can combine these, right? Because this is what I want to start getting you thinking about this is you should not be limited by these shapes I give you. I really want you to take this and really start to understand how clothing works. Like, see this? You can combine these, right? I can put these on both sides, and that still looks right. See that? Even so, don't get hung up on I guess you might call like prefabrications or like step-by-step guidelines. And I see this a lot in artists where they really just kind of like they get into the step-by-step mindset, and that's not wrong. Step by step is a really good way to learn to just kind of introduce yourself to it. But I want you to keep your mind open to the end game. And the end game is that not that you have a really good step by step, but that you fundamentally understand the properties of the object. Because once you get to that, and once you realize you're going to that step, once it's integrated and you just have this like forever existing 3D model of fabric in your head, it becomes almost impossible to draw it wrong because those, let's call them like, yeah, the fabrications, prefabrications, like step by steps, they only work within the context you learn them. What does that mean? That means if I learn like how to draw this draping example right over here, step by step, and I have that, the second it rotates slightly, if I do it at 3/4, I'm lost because I don't understand the object's properties in 3D space. I don't like you don't have that. And so for me, because I've done this so many times, I can take this object and rotate it at any angle. And inside my head, there is a 3D object I am actually referencing from. That is what's happening in my brain. It's like I went into Pinterest, found the exact reference, and I can then pull from my head and put it onto some kind of 2D medium. And that is where I want you to like be mindful of where you should go if you want to master this stuff. Like really, like you don't have problems drawing it. It's just flows onto the page like nothing. And that's the idea. And so with this idea of combining these drapery folds and these pardon, the advanced tension, I want to show you a toga because that is a great piece of fabric to play with because you've got these big cloaks, right? These big fancy cloaks. And you can see here on Mr. Toga Toga Toga, not My Hero Academia, Damia, we have both these folds I just talked about existing, right? And we're going to keep using this guy. Whoops, it's sliding around like it's got something to prove. Let's use pink. Pink's going to stand well, right? We want a nice hot pink, right? So you can see here, he's got this draping thing happening. See how it gets wider? There's lots of little intricate in-betweens, but that's the general pattern. Make him a little lighter so we can see this, right? Here's like a soft one, a little bigger, a little bigger, a little bigger, a little bigger. And there's little ones in between, right? Do we see that? And at the same time, over here on his arm, let's use red. You can see, right? See all this, I mean, it's over in shade here, but you can kind of make it up. But see this fancy little zigzag fold stuff going on, right? You can like draw the tension point up top here. You can draw your little loopy doopies down here, your zigzags, and just draw them in. See that? Clothing's not so scary, right? It's actually clothing, once you understand it, is pretty easy to just sort of do. Now, as you see here, there's something new over here. What is this? What is this? What is this? I am concerned by this. These are advanced compression, right? And that's why I wanted to save this till we had these first big pieces in here. So let's just come back to all this. Boom. As we remember from last week, because we have perfect memories like elephants, we talked about compression, right? And that's where you take your straight line of fabric and you smush it up, right? And you can make them big or you can just do like super tight. And as we talked about last week, sometimes they kind of layer on each other. And this is just from the side. I'm just kind of showing it, right? You can kind of layer it and they just sort of make all these weird little folds, right? Which, watch this. If I were to take this, I just made this line randomly, super randomly. You can make fabric out of this, right? Let me just show you here real quick how simple this is. Like it's so simple. It's just like, come on, guys. Right? You just connect, you just draw two lines, right? Two lines. And then you just connect the dots. That's all fabric is. It's just connecting the dots and paying attention to your folds and using that big old pretty brain of yours, right? See? Suddenly I have a piece of fabric that makes sense. I'm just squiggling this in because it's a little bit of an aside that I want to show you. This isn't actually that scary, right? Look at that. I made this up entirely, just following the rules of fabric, right? You see that? See how not scary that is? Please tell me it's not scary, right? But that's how compression works, right? Is you just take it, you scrunch it. And when you scrunch it, thank you. Well, trust me, it'll be easy after you do it a bunch too, okay? But that's kind of what's happening here with compression is you just have these two ends of your fabric and you just push them together, right? Let's let's do a real big example. So you can see what I'm talking about because we're gonna go do his sleeve and then it's gonna get kind of weird. It's gonna be in real life. So this is like our piece of fabric, right? Let's turn this other layer off here so I have the room. Fabric, 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 fabric. And let's pay attention to this here. So what we looked at before was a very simple wave pattern, right? As we look at this guy here, that's all it is. And we kind of touched on this when I went into the leather, is that it can kind of fold on itself as well as scrunch, right? Because it can kind of pinch at the bases here, and it can keep pinching until it touches, right? It can touch like that, and the fabric is still there, right? All of it doesn't cease to exist because it's on top of itself, which sounds so obvious when you say it, but that is really the secret sauce to clothing is just understanding it doesn't cease to exist. Because once you have that just in your brain as a cognizant reality, it makes it kind of hard to mess it up. At least we're how I think about it, right? And that's, very important to point out that how I think about it and how it works for me isn't necessarily what works for you. So if this isn't clicking and you hate all the words leaving my mouth, don't be afraid to go look for answers somewhere else because not everybody's going to be your ideal teacher, okay? Hopefully, I hope that this is what cracks the code for you and just opens up this big fancy world of clothing and you can just put togas on all your characters and show off like old Renaissance masters, right? That's what I want to see you guys do. But back to compression. Hopeful things aside, right? Watch this. So here's a bigger version. Again, I just made up some random lines and you just connect them. And you connect them following this general principle, right? So over here is the side of cloth. And over here we'll do a lighter version, right? The sides are the sides. They don't do much, right? If you have if it's how do I say this? So if you have a section that's above another section, it goes over top, right? See that? That just connects. And if it's underneath, right, you see how it kind of how it crosses over. You don't draw that part in, and you just do this, right? That's how the top part works. And the bottom part is you just have to think about this part underneath, right? And imagine, and connect it, right? Because this is where it should connect. That's where the cloth functionally still exists. So just keep coming on through and then do it, right? Keep coming on through and then connect it. Do you see what I'm talking about here? How I'm really trying to emphasize this really like esoteric point of you have to keep imagining where the cloth is, even though you can't see it. Because if you can imagine it, you can understand where these connections have to happen. Does that make sense? Are we getting some lights and light bulbs and I don't know, fluorescent lights going off in your head, right? What if you're looking down at the fabric with the top go under? Could you ask that a different way? That I can see like three ways to answer that. And I want to make sure I give you the right answer. A spooky Roman ghost. That's funny. Incandescent light, brain light flickering, all good. So yeah, Tunavio, could you please you're trying to reiterate the question? That's okay. When you get it, put the question there. I'll answer it. So we're gonna refer to it later. I will just keep going with my clothing diatribe here, right? Let me think about that. Maybe I can figure that out for you. If you're looking down at the fabric, would the top go under? The top go under. I'm afraid that question does not make sense to me for what you want me to explain. So if you can figure it out, please. Maybe if I keep going, it'll start clicking. So let's hope that's what happens. If not, we can revisit in the Q&A section. Okay. So right, and let's just to make this clear, I'm going to show you when something's over, when something under, right? Because that's how we do our connections. So this one is folded under in the back, right? These are under folds. This one doesn't do much, doesn't do much, doesn't do much, doesn't do much. This is a big one, right? Then connect the sides because that's easy, right? And let's use green for this. And now the parts that are over on top, right? So that would be this is a top piece, right? This is on top of something, on top of something, on top of something. Same thing down here. This is on top, on top, on top, on tippy top, right? Oop, that is black and the wrong color. And this is under, 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 big under, right? Yeah, yeah, I get lag on the brush. No, I get lag on the brush too, and it's a little weird to draw. I have to just trust that I made the right line. So the pain is mutual. I'm with you on that one. Okay. So do we understand this idea of the above and the bottom sections to the fabric folds? So far, so good. Is that helping clear up your question a little bit? Okay, good, good. I was hoping that would just kind of do it. So what you do is the green sections, the top sections, these guys, you have to connect them first because these top sections will, of course, block out your bottom sections, right? So we'll draw those in. And you just connect the dots right here and here, right? Connect the point. Connect, 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 right? Okay. And so why don't we, and at this point, this blue section, you just wouldn't show these, right? They would just go away. But we got to use them for the next part. The next part, you're going to connect these bits. See those? But this section here is blocked by this top quote unquote green section. So we don't want to actually put that in. You just want to imagine it's there, right? And then you actually put the line in. See that? It's there. Put the line in, right? This one you can't really see because I made those just kind of quick scrunchy folds. Here, right? Imagine, 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 imagine. Boom, boom. See that? And then we just get rid of our tracing stuff here, get the blue off, and then just connect the rest, right? Here's this, here's this, here's this, here's this, here's this. Boom, 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 boom. And you just put it all together, right? It's like a bunch of S's all just working together to make clothing. Nope, we want that. That's part of our design. Okay, so that's how advanced compression works, right? As we smush it all together, right? And all that happens is you just get a change in how tight the compression is. Right here, it's some looser compressions. They just kind of like a little like that. Here's a really advanced one over here. Here's kind of a medium one. And that's all that really happens is you just go from like, the line of fabric, the side, and then it gets closer and closer and closer until it's like on top of itself. See that? And that's just our general progression of compression. And all you do is you just combine these shapes because that's what's happening, right? So if we go back to our fancy napkin man, I believe they're called Romans, right? The fancy napkin people. I believe that's what Roman means in Italian is people of the fancy napkins. Um, I read a lot of history, so that's definitely accurate. That is factual. Go tell your nearest Italian that fun fact, and they will confirm that. Yes, they are the fancy napkin people. How did you know? Who told you? That wasn't cool. Yeah. Right. So that brings us to the last major portion here. And there's one more we can cover real quick after this, but right. That brings us to the compression part. So let's zoom in real tight, and you can see these compressions, right? How it just kind of folds on itself. And each one of these just folds on itself. Do you see that now? Is that like, oh, okay, right? See it? They're just all these like tubes hanging off as the fabric compresses, right? Do we see that? Please tell me we see that. Good. Okay, so that rounds up. We covered this drape part, right? That here, there's our drapery. This is the drapery or the draping style, right? And then right here we have what you might call advanced tension. Or let's call it like stacking tension, because that's where you get those like S shapes, right? Stacking tension. And over here is compression. This is really tight compression. And then we have two more I want to go over before we finish this, and that is I should have done this at the beginning so we kind of know what's going on. Is we have here what I might call, here, let's call this heavy compression, and this is uh let's call it draped compression, because this is what happens when something is hanging off something and it rests at the bottom of their object. And up here, what we might um call this one stacking tension. Let's call this like, I guess, draped tension. Because I'll remember, all we only have two forces. There's like a pull and a push, right? This is draped tension. I want to make sure the language is not too random, but honestly, there's no like guideline to this, right? So as we get into the idea of draped compression, what is happening is you have a tension point, right? But then there's a floor. So you don't get that full extension of your fabric because the stupid earth is in the way and it's making our lives complicated. And I hate the earth. Or in this case, it's the guy's elbow, right? His arm is bent up and it's hitting it. So what happens is it's a compression, right? So you get that like that kind of side. This is a side view, right? And the fabric will kind of pool into itself. And there's a lot of different ways to draw this. The general way is to imagine, I like to think of it in kind of waves that do this, and they get less and less angry, right? I'll draw one more time a little slower. Like you come down straight, and there's a small wave, there's a bigger wave, and a bigger wave, and a bigger wave, and a bigger wave, and a bigger wave. And that's kind of what's happening as the fabric pools into itself to rest on the ground, right? And the size of the wave, the severity of it depends on how much fabric is actually stacking on itself, as well as the qualities of the fabric, because that can kind of change. That goes into that idea of like loose versus really structured fabric. And that's where you have to be mindful of this is how much does it try and retain its own shape. But in general, you can't go wrong with this wavy kind of thing, right? And then what you do is you work in these in-between areas. That's where the magic happens, right? So just draw your general wave, and then I need a new layer, right? Right. These are you just draw out kind of like this zigzag diamond kind of pattern, and that's how things stack. And you can just see how they get kind of bigger, or they get more less impressive the higher up you go, right? So if we turn this down now further, and we just have these shapes. If we go and we draw our fabric, let's say this is an arm, right? And we're going to pretend this is an arm. So there's dupe. That's actually kind of weird. Let's just say it's a pole because you wouldn't have your arm in this big pile of fabric pooling around it. Because I'm being a little excessive to get the ideas across, right? So if your fabric's on this, right, it comes down. We don't really see this part yet, so we don't really need that, right? We can just sort of, right, because the pole doesn't quite get there. But all of a sudden, we have a buckle and a buckle, and we're just see how I'm just following the edge of this. See that? You just follow the edge, and sometimes you can either bulge and then meet it, or you can just go right around it, right? Either or. Does that make sense? Right. So as you make these lines, you can either put a bulge in between your shapes like that, or go around it entirely, right? You don't meet it, you just go around it. And that implies the object doesn't quite meet. See that? And the thing to keep in mind is these shapes we made can also come around from the side because we're dealing with 3D objects in 3D space, and God wants to make our lives difficult, right? We do this too. Right. And then as far as here, we don't need this anymore. As far as how fabric works, you can just kind of you can draw in the whole thing, the whole blue shape if you want, or just imply it. Like here, I can just kind of imply it at the top. But as I get lower, I want to put more of it actually in, right? So boom, right? If I turn up my guides, see how that looks like fabric kind of pooling. And this is very excessive. To get the idea across, this is not super realistic. I just want to get that kind of those like little bunching zigzag pockets going on. Because if we go back to our fancy napkin man, the Romans, yeah, cloth does not look like flowing liquid. The point of this example that looks like maple syrup being poured is to get the ideas across. I wanted to really be hyperbolic here so that you see what's happening. In real life, this does not actually happen. As we go over to our reference here, you can see it happening. Oops, right here. See that? Creates that kind of zigzag, right? If I were to draw that out, you can see, you see like this little pattern right here, his little folds. And you can see that this is actually just more open compression, right? Because this is quite a big open shape, right? Big shape, bigger shape, but then it starts getting tighter, right? As it actually turns really, really compressed. And that's what's actually happening, right? And right here's a big shape. See this? And that's what's happening is this fabric is bunching in on itself. And that's why I called this kind of draped compression. You call it loose compression if you want, right? Because if I come back to this, right, if we draw it on the side, if I like draw his shoulder here, we come down, there's a tension point up top here that it's hanging from, right? And then remember you get those like radiations, right? Radiate. But then we have these kinds of pockets that the fabric forms, right? As it bunches in on itself. And if I sketch over top of that, you'll see what I'm talking about. I hope, right? So you can see, right? Oh, whoops. See how light this one is? Like this is a very light one. And this is go back to the point of I see the question there. Do the shapes get shaded in? It depends how much the fabric is folded against the light source. So, for instance, you can see right here, this edge is going to cut off the light. So this all gets shaded in, right? Or for instance, right here, right? See this? This all gets shaded in because the clothing is casting a shadow, right? Because that lip of that clothing, like if this is the light source, right? And our cloth is say hanging off the here, right? If there's like a piece of clothing hanging off something and it folds a little, and this is our light source, this all gets shade, right? We shade in underneath the fabric, right? So this is all just our folds, boom, 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 shade, 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 right? You see that? Does that make sense as far as the shading? Excellent, 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 excellent. So, do we understand the idea of this kind of draping, pooling compression? Is that making some sense to people? Do I need to cover a little bit more? Do we have any questions on that? Take a second for the chat, maybe have a sip of water, stare at the piece of paper and go, I don't get it. I do get it. Where are we? Okay. Just need some time to train. That's good. I know this could be a lot to digest up front, but that's why we are going to just reference this video over and over and over. Well, okay. So as far as clueless when it comes to shading, I don't want to get into the shading too much because light is its own world. It's very relevant because I mean, all you're really doing in art is you're just kind of using your lines to just communicate um, what light is doing to 3D objects is what we're really doing is we're just kind of capturing how light and shade interact to create forms. But I just want to focus on the forms at a really fundamental level here. Let's see. We got some stuff here. So, like if an arm is in a long sleeve, you draw the bunches around the folds. I will actually get next week. Yeah, I'm going to go more over how clothing reacts to the human body and drapes around the human body. I'm just kind of using my Roman guy here as a inanimate object to kind of go over these different variations of how tension and compression can um yeah, these major shapes, tension and compression. Because so far we've covered, we put on our little pokey thing here, right? Is the general draping, right? This one here, how it does those kinds of shapes, right? We have our stacking tension ones where you have a tension point and then there's just a lot of this and it just stacks up, right? Then we have our heavy compression right here, and that's when you have a piece of fabric that's just like super tight and it just forms these like ribs, right? Undo, undo. Then we have our drape compression where it kind of comes down and pools into these kinds of zigzags, right? That's one way clothing works. And then last one, this one's really simple, honestly. This is what you might call drape tension, and there's just a point up here in this case. Yes, all the images will be saved. I will be handing out the Photoshop file later. And then likely after we're done, I'll get this all cleaned up and send you guys the cleaned up version with all the various timestamps and references and make sure everything's nice and pretty. But I wanted to get all of the lecture done before I do the cleaned up version, just to make sure I can do it all holistically. So there's no like doubling up of reference material. But I will be sending out the Photoshop file after this, as well as the video recording. And if anybody has trouble with Photoshop files, let me know. I can just send out individual images. Anyways, for the last piece, the simple one at the very end here is the drape tension. That's where you have it's kind of like the like the diaper one, but really simple. Like you have just one piece of tension and some point where it's going, and you just kind of draw lines between them, right? Say this is our fabric, right? And it's just going to have these kinds of radiating lines. That's it. That one's Pretty simple. And you can see here at the top, there's a little bit of the compression thing going on where it's folding on itself. But hopefully you're starting to see how all of these are really just the same thing on a different part of the object. Are you starting to see that, hopefully? Right? Like these aren't really, all the language is kind of confusing, maybe, or unnecessary, because really you're just getting the same pattern over and over and over. It's just either the fold's tight or the fold's loose, right? Is there a lot of excess fabric? Is there not a lot of excess fabric? And then it's okay, it's all clicking, just kind of guides depending on how the clothes are falling. Because yeah, that's really what's happening. Like that's why I was really harping on the building like a physics engine in your head because clothing has no will of its own. All it will do is what gravity says, right? And then it just depends what's holding it, how much excess fabric is there, right? Because like here, let's do a really I'll just go freaking nuts here. Let's go ham, right? Let's just say in our last little example before I dive into a Q&A, hopefully this just destroys some cues. Let's say I got like I don't know, two posts, right? We're gonna just draw two posts, right? And they're just hanging out here. I want to just have a piece. Actually, let's just make these a little less. I just realized that it's going to make this very complicated to see what happens because I'm going to understand it, but I don't want to lose anybody. So let's say we have, hell, let's do more posts. These are just posts and they're just facing you, right? Maybe like little ones like this, big 3D space posts. These are actually like 20-foot posts, but we just can't tell because they're looking right at us, right? And I have a big blanket and I'm just hanging it. So let's say this is our blanket, right? It looks like this, but I'm going to put it on those posts up there, right? So this part here, there's going to be four tension points. This part's going to hang. This one hangs a little bit. This one hangs a lot, right? See this? And I don't know, this one's really tight. And then it hangs, right? See that? It's almost like a piece of string, right? So let's move on to the next layer. We have our general form of fabric, right? As it just hangs there. Well, let's do one of our fancy little compressions over here, one of these draped ones, right? I am literally making this line up as I go. There is no logic to this line. Let's do a little more like this, I think. I think I like a little simpler. And this one over here, it's going to drape like this, right? And actually, to make things fun, let's say that this one's not a post, but it's actually a little flat section. So we can do some compression. So we want to do some compression, right? And it's going to compress, 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 and then hang off, right? This one's just a light version, right? So we have our general forms here. And this one, we can do a little simple one, right? Okay, well, let's make that lighter and move on to just some more sketching. We don't need this anymore. Okay, so now we just connect the dots. Let's use blue. I like blue. I bet you do too, right? Remember, there's a tension point up here. So we have our connections, connect, right? Just connect the dots. Here's our tension point, brings it down. Boom, 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 right? Look at that. Look at that. Oh, she's singing. She is singing, right? Connect your dots. Isn't that easy? Okay, well, our fabric's all here and it just bunches up, right? See that there's those zigzags I'm making right here. You see that? You see that? How it bunches up? Because it's just forming these cylinders, right? Then we got some big ones. Now we got some big fellas because it's nice and lazy here, right? And so, like, if you think of this, I'm going to put a little bit of a weird spin on it. There's like a 3D form to it, right? To each one of the folds. As far as shading is concerned, now this is not the right line because I've had to turn it a little bit so you can see it because it's facing us. But like, because it's a cylinder, right? And let's say the light's coming from the top, right? We have this kind of pattern, lights from the top. Well, then the bottom part gets shade. See that? Shade, 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 shade. Shade, 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 shade. Right? Is that making some more sense? And then compression, I mean, you can't really show much compression up here because it's all bunched, but we just do it like there and then do 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 do. See that? In here, maybe I can I realize the compression is not a very good example in that case there because it doesn't really work. That's confusing. Right, let's get rid of this so it's a little simpler to see what's happening because we don't want this to be confusing. There's our posts. Get rid of the shade, get rid of the red. Just draw it in. Right. So with that, is this making a little more sense? I hope. I'm getting some clicking. After I take a nap. It'll make sense after a nap. Okay. Well, let's with because I started 10 after. Let's take this area and turn it to the side so you can see those compression things I was talking about, right? So let's turn this off, make a couple new layers. Uh-huh, uh-huh. Right. So now we're gonna do that side version. So, right, here's that kind of hang I was talking about. And over here's another post, but I won't draw it in so you can see what's happening. So just imagine there's a post here. There's an imaginary post. Boop, 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 boop. It's not here. It's shy. Respect it. Okay. So we talk about like compressions, right? Remember, it makes those like folds. It folds, it folds, it folds. And from these, you can just draw new lines. Now remember, there's 3D space here. It comes up onto our shy post. So you just have to kind of remember that and hide it, right? And we have some more stuff up here too. See that? And there's like our fabric, 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 right? See how that's hanging now? And like over here, you'd see those hangs. You kind of see that from the side? Is that getting us some real bells, right? Is that clicking? If I do it from 3/4, as I show you that there's just these sort of cylinders that form, and we're just sort of connecting all of these little bumpies. I'm happy it looks easy. I assure you this did not happen overnight. This was something I had to earn through blood, sweat, and tears and a lot of practice, right? And so each of these, this is like a cylinder, right? If you have a cylinder and you light it, right? We've all done our cylinder drills, right? Let's do that a little cleaner. Otherwise, it's like, yeah, it looks so easy. Then you just draw the worst cylinder on planet Earth. It's like, who is this guy? Right? But if you draw a cylinder, right, this is how it's lit, right? That's how you light it. Well, all of these are cylinders. Every single one of these is a cylinder, right? And they behave just like cylinders, where the top part gets the most light and then it diffuses around the cylinder, right? And that's all that's happening. All of this is just cylinders. So all of this stuff in here, this is shade. Shade, 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 right? Well, this stuff is shade because these are cylinders. right? Does that make sense? Do I need to like put in all of these? I mean, you can also, you can also like they'll split sometimes, they'll fork, right? Because maybe the fold doesn't come all the way up. You get something like this, right? You can sometimes it can do like a zigzag, right? Like this, where it can kind of that's actually a horrible way to draw this, right? You see that? Maybe it does this, maybe it zigs and then it zags, right? Hopefully that's all making sense. So, does the three-quarter help, or did I just make things even more complicated and stressful? I hope I made it more stressful. No, I don't want that. I want you guys to go, oh, clothing. Okay. Okay. Oh, my. Anyways, with that, that is the lecture. That's all the points I wanted to cover. Do you have any questions you'd like me to go into? Any burning things I did not cover that are just like Rusatsu help? Okay, yes. I'll give you guys a couple seconds. So, just got a little comment there. Most of the questions are going to be covered in the next lesson. Yes, the next. Whoa, my chair actually just gave out. I got that on. That's recorded. That is staying in the recording. My, I almost fell out of my chair. Oh, thank God the webcam's off. Okay. Anyways, yes. So in the next lecture, will be humans and clothing together working in tandem. Yeah, I know. I leaned back and there's a little button on my chair, I guess kind of worn out because I'm using this chair for a little while. And it decided to betray me in that moment.